The pressure was supposed to be unbearable. 80,000 fans, the opening match of the biggest World Cup in football history, an entire nation watching, and a team carrying years of expectation on its shoulders. For Mexico, this wasn't supposed to be just another football match. It was a test of nerves, a test of belief, and perhaps most importantly, a test of whether they could finally handle the weight of the moment. Because World Cup opening matches have a strange history. They create heroes, they create villains, and sometimes they create disasters. But as the lights came on inside the Estadio Azteca, nobody could have predicted how quickly this game would spiral into chaos, red cards, emotional collapses, and one moment that may have changed the direction of the entire tournament. This is the story of how Mexico's World Cup began. Long before the first whistle, this match already felt different. The Estadio Azteca wasn't just hosting a football game. It was hosting the beginning of an entire World Cup. Millions were watching. Every camera in football was pointed toward Mexico. And with that attention came pressure. Massive pressure. Because opening matches are dangerous. Nobody wants to become the first disappointment of the tournament. Nobody wants to spend the next 4 years being remembered for failure. Mexico understood that better than anyone. They were playing at home. They were carrying the expectations of an entire nation, and they knew that one mistake could change the mood of the entire tournament. South Africa, meanwhile, arrived with a completely different mindset. They weren't expected to dominate. They weren't expected to control the game, which made them dangerous. Teams with less pressure often play with more freedom, and for a few moments before kickoff, it felt like anything could happen. But then the ball started rolling, and Mexico immediately sent a message to the rest of the world. From the opening minutes, Mexico looked determined to take control. The energy inside the stadium was impossible to ignore. Every tackle was louder, every attack felt bigger, every touch seemed to carry the weight of expectation. And then came the first warning. Raúl Jiménez nearly found the breakthrough with an early effort that forced a strong save. It wasn't a goal, but it was a signal. Mexico were coming. South Africa could feel it, the crowd could feel it. And only minutes later, the breakthrough finally arrived. Julián Quiñones found the moment Mexico had been waiting for. The stadium exploded. Flags flew through the air. The noise became deafening. And just like that, Mexico had scored the first goal of World Cup 2026. But the goal itself wasn't the most important part. It was what happened afterward. Because South Africa suddenly found themselves chasing the game. The pressure increased. The mistakes started appearing. And little by little, the match began moving toward something much more chaotic than anyone expected. At 1-0, South Africa still had time. Plenty of time. A single attack could change everything. One moment of quality could silence the entire stadium. But instead of growing into the game, South Africa started losing control of it. Mexico continued pushing forward. The crowd sensed weakness. Every Mexican attack was met with another roar from the stands. Every South African mistake seemed to increase the pressure, and that pressure slowly began turning into frustration. The passes became rushed, the decisions became slower, the confidence started disappearing. Mexico weren't just winning the football match anymore, they were winning the emotional battle. And in tournaments like the World Cup, emotional battles can be even more important than tactical ones. Then came the moment that changed everything. A desperate challenge, a split-second decision. And suddenly, the referee reached for his pocket. Red card. South Africa were down to 10 men. Just like that, the entire game changed. The pressure became heavier, the task became harder, and the opening match of the World Cup started slipping away. But the worst moment of the night was still waiting to arrive. At this point, the result seemed decided. Mexico were in control. South Africa were down a man. The opening match of the World Cup appeared to be slipping quietly toward its conclusion. But World Cups rarely end quietly, especially when pressure, frustration, and emotion begin to collide. As the clock moved deeper into the second half, the intensity of the match started changing. Every challenge became more aggressive. Every decision became more emotional. Every minute felt heavier than the last. South Africa knew time was running out. Mexico sensed victory getting closer, and somewhere between those two realities, discipline began to disappear. Then came another major moment, another challenge, another decision, another red card. Suddenly, South Africa were reduced to 9 men. 9. in the opening match of a World Cup. The frustration was impossible to hide. The pressure had finally broken them. But even then, the drama wasn't finished. Deep into stoppage time, Mexico's Cesar Montes was also shown a red card. And just like that, a match that began with celebration ended with chaos. 3 red cards, endless tension, and a result that suddenly felt bigger than a simple 2-0 victory. Because this wasn't just about 3 points anymore, this felt like a warning. A warning to the rest of the tournament. Because opening matches are often remembered for their symbolism. They tell us something. Not everything, but something. And Mexico's performance sent a very clear message. They were prepared for the pressure. They embraced it. While many teams might have frozen under the weight of expectation, Mexico grew stronger as the match progressed. That matters, especially in tournament football, because talent alone never wins World Cups. Teams must survive pressure, survive momentum swings, survive emotional moments. And in their opening test, Mexico passed. But there is another side to this story. South Africa now face a completely different reality. They leave the opening match with a defeat, multiple suspensions, growing pressure, and very little room for error moving forward. The next match suddenly becomes enormous. Lose again, and the tournament could be slipping away. Win, and everything changes. That's how quickly World Cups move. One night creates confidence. One night creates doubt. And sometimes, one night changes the direction of an entire campaign. Which raises the biggest question of all. Was this simply a strong start from Mexico, or was it the beginning of something much bigger? Maybe that's why World Cup opening matches feel different from every other game, because they are never just 90 minutes of football. They are the beginning of stories, the beginning of dreams, and sometimes the beginning of disasters. On this night, Mexico carried the pressure of an entire nation. 80,000 fans inside the Azteca, millions more watching around the world. The weight of expectation, the fear of failure, the responsibility of opening the biggest World Cup in football history. And somehow, they turned that pressure into confidence. They turned doubt into belief. They turned expectation into victory. But tournaments are never decided in one night, not even nights like this. The real challenge is what comes next. Can Mexico build on this momentum? Can they handle the growing expectations? Can they prove this performance was the beginning of something special? And on the other side, South Africa must somehow recover. Because World Cups are ruthless. They do not wait for teams to feel ready again. The next challenge is already coming. The next pressure is already building. The next story is already beginning. But for now, one thing is clear. Mexico didn't just win the opening match of World Cup 2026. They sent a message, and the rest of the football world is now paying attention. And before we move on to the next chapter of this World Cup, I'd love to hear your prediction. Do you think Mexico's performance was the start of something special? Or are we overreacting after just one match? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoy cinematic football stories like this one, consider subscribing to Final Whistle so you don't miss the next chapter of World Cup 2026. But the World Cup never stops after one night. While Mexico celebrates and South Africa searches for answers, the tournament is already moving forward. New pressure, new expectations, new opportunities for heroes to emerge, and for dreams to collapse. Because if the opening match was this intense, imagine what's still waiting ahead. And trust me, this story is only getting started.